Now, from CBS News Miami, this is Facing South Florida with Jim DeFede.
Welcome to Facing South Florida. I'm Jim DeFede. Later in the show, we will talk to the Mayor of Miramar about Miami-Dade County's plan to try and build a trash incinerator just south of their city and on the edge of the Everglades. He opposes it and is threatening a lawsuit. But first, the race for the United States Senate is set, with Democrat Debbie Mucarsel-Powell taking on Republican Rick Scott. If Democrats were to win this race, it would almost certainly mean Democrats would retain control of the Senate. But that's a big if, as Scott and the Republicans have a clear advantage in Florida. Joining me now to discuss how she can overcome that advantage is former Democratic Congresswoman Debbie Mucarsel-Powell. Thank you very much for coming in.
Good morning, Jim. Thank you for having me.
So let's start with that. One of the challenges I think you face is the very perception that I outlined at the beginning of the show, the idea that Republicans have a clear advantage. Ron DeSantis won the state by 19 points in 22. Republicans have more than 1 million registered voter advantage over Democrats. So how do you beat Rick Scott?
So from the very beginning, Jim, when we launched the campaign, I launched the campaign over a year ago, I have been bringing Republicans, Democrats, and independents to the fold because the issues that we're facing here in the state of Florida should never be political. The affordability crisis, people paying skyrocketing property insurance rates. This insurance crisis began under Rick Scott. People can't afford to pay for their groceries. Yes, when he was governor. The issue of government interference and taking away our freedoms, our rights, this is an issue that really strikes a chord for Floridians. We have always had that independent streak in us, and I can tell you that at the end of the day, one thing that people don't realize is that women are energized, creating a movement, the men right next to them, beside them, making sure that we protect a woman's right to choose, but also independents. Independent voters are done with the extremism that they've been seeing from Tallahassee, from Rick Scott. Rick Scott has been one of the most extreme senators, as you know. He's the least bipartisan senator that we have in the United States Senate. He has voted against infrastructure investments, resiliency, against the CHIPS Act, which would put a firm hand against China and bring manufacturing jobs to our state. He obviously supports a very extreme ban on abortion. He has said it time and time again, the 6-week abortion ban. He has co-sponsored a national abortion ban. And he's done nothing to help Florida families. If anything, he wrote a plan that would raise taxes on middle-class families, that would sunset Medicare and Social Security. He's also been very vocal about repealing the Affordable Care Act, and those are issues that I've worked on my entire career.
So you've mentioned a couple of times in there abortion. And clearly this is a driving issue, not just nationally, but here in Florida. We have the constitutional amendment, Amendment 4, on the ballot. Currently, Florida has a 6-week abortion ban, which largely is basically a virtual ban on abortions in Florida. This is also an issue raising nationally, and Donald Trump was asked in Michigan this week about how he would vote on that constitutional amendment, and I want to play for you that sound.
The state that you are a resident of, there's an abortion-related amendment on the ballot to overturn the 6-week ban in Florida. How are you going to vote on that?
Well, I think the 6 week is too short. It has to be more time, and so and I've told them that I want more weeks.
So you'll vote in favor of the amendment?
I am going to be voting that we need more than 6 weeks.
Now, I should make clear that even though it sounded like he had just come out in support of the amendment, his campaign quickly put out a note saying that that's not exactly what he said. He is not saying that he's going to vote for it, and he's going to address that issue later. The issue of abortion is really, it's almost the dog catching the car. You know, Republicans don't know what to do with it now.
Well, I mean, I think that he's seeing the writing on the wall. He understands that here in Florida, these policies, the 6-week abortion ban, doesn't reflect the values of Floridian. It's such an extreme ban that over 60% of Floridians, regardless of political affiliation, support voting for this amendment. It should be a private decision between a woman, her doctor, her family, her faith, free of government interference, especially free of people like Rick Scott. I mean, I have to share something with you, Jim. He has been talking about the abortion issue and talking in a way that is extremely disturbing. He actually had a conversation with students at the University of Miami. I happened to have come in towards the end of that class and heard him speak. And I can tell you that the lies that he's saying about killing babies, crushing their skull. I mean, using extremely disturbing language. And I watched those young women in that classroom. There were over 250 students in that classroom. And I saw them feel so uncomfortable. And as a mom, I can tell you, I would never want my daughter to hear a man like Rick Scott talk to them about something that is integral and central to our bodies, to our healthcare. And it's definitely a private issue for a woman. And listening to Rick Scott, it was so disturbing. And there were young women that came to me after that class and said to me, thank you so much for speaking up against those false attacks, the disinformation that Rick Scott is using. This is so private for us. And it made me even more bold to make sure that I stand up for the young women across our state, for the women across our state, also for the young men that are with us, standing beside us saying, Rick Scott has no place in this conversation. How dare politicians like him or the ex-president have any decision?
Politically, the challenge is, how do you convert some of those women, some of those men, Republicans, who may vote for instance, Rick Scott or Donald Trump, but also vote yes on the amendment? We found in a poll that we did, CBS statewide, a few months ago, that upwards of 40% of Trump voters in Florida say they will vote for Amendment 4. How do you convince them that it's not just, you shouldn't also support Donald Trump? If you vote for the constitutional amendment on abortion, you shouldn't be voting for Donald Trump and or Rick Scott.
Yeah, and we have to remind every single voter in our state that we are in this mess right now, facing a 6-week abortion ban in the state of Florida because the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade. And Republicans like Rick Scott, like Donald Trump have been saying, leave it to the states. And what does that mean? It means a 6-week abortion ban here for the state of Florida. So if they vote for Amendment 4 to enshrine in the state constitution the right for a woman to make that decision with her doctor, free of government interference, it'll mean nothing if we pass this amendment and then Donald Trump gets back to the White House, Rick Scott gets reelected to the Senate, and they push a national abortion ban.
Now, Donald Trump has said he would not support a national abortion ban.
And the question is, let's look at what's happened that has brought us to this point. I mean, he was very proud to say that he took responsibility for the Supreme Court justices, the nominations, the confirmations, which brought us to this point. So we need to make sure that people look at their record, their past record. But let's get back to Rick Scott for a second, because he wrote this plan that I just mentioned. I see it as a preamble to Project 2025. Rick Scott has been very much aligned with Project 2025. Not only do they want to ban abortion nationally, they want to criminalize doctors and healthcare providers for providing that critical healthcare for a woman. We're living in the United States of America. Jim, my mother brought me here for freedom, for safety, for opportunities. And we are now living in a state where women have to travel when they can't terminate a pregnancy, when it's posing a threat to her life. I have had multiple conversations with healthcare providers and also women that are being now forced to travel out of state because they can't get the healthcare that they need here in the state of Florida.
How do you present that message if you don't have the money to be able to do it? I don't get the sense, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee is helping you the way that they're helping other incumbents, you know, who are more vulnerable than you, who's trying to turn Florida, you know, blue in terms of the Rick Scott race. How do you do that, and why aren't they investing in you?
So, from the beginning, and you and I have had that conversation, I have been running this campaign. This is my campaign. I am not relying on any party, any organization. I've always known that we have to build a team to do exactly what we need to do to defeat Rick Scott. And my primary results showed the strength of the campaign. It showed the support, the very strong support, overwhelmingly support from everyone across the state. I've been traveling for over a year to red counties, to blue counties, to bring everyone to the fold. This is a grassroots campaign.
What does having Harris at the top of the ticket do now for your chances compared to 40, 45 days ago when Joe Biden was at the top of the ticket?
Well, what we've seen is that there are over 30,000 new volunteers that have signed up to volunteer not only in her campaign, but also to help me defeat Rick Scott, there's a new energy on the ground. I mean, what you see on television with those rallies, that's happening. I was in Sarasota last week, and there were over 200 women that were so ready to put in the work to make the changes that we need here for our families in the state of Florida. So it's translating. It's bringing up young voters that are registering, that are excited to come out and vote. And so we may not have the money that Rick Scott will have, but I can tell you that the people that are on the ground, if you come with me, and I invite you to come with me, Jim, I'm traveling everywhere, you will see that energy, and you'll have a different perspective on what's happening.
Rick Scott has already declared that he wants to become the Republican leader in the Senate, sort of bypassing this election and already looking ahead to what's next. Do you find that insulting at all?
I mean, I'm laughing a little bit because he barely got any votes when he ran the first time for Senate Majority Leader, and the arrogance is going to get him at the end, right? I mean, let him think that that's what he wants to do. I'm not paying attention to that. I'm paying attention to the families that I'm talking to every single day. But I do remind people that as much as I find it a little funny that he's so arrogant and full of himself, it's serious also. If he does get reelected, and if he does somehow get the support in the Senate to become Senate Majority Leader, it would mean raising taxes for middle class families. It would mean no leadership in reducing the cost of insurance that we're facing here in the state. It will mean no investments on resiliency. He's against any sort of issue or bill that will protect our environment here in the state of Florida. And he will push for a national abortion ban. He is aligned with the Heritage Foundation, with the most extreme organization that is pushing Project 2025. And so people need to pay attention, not only in Florida, but across the country. So much of this race may come down to just sort of turnout and also tapping into voters who aren't necessarily reflected in the polls, energizing new voters. Are you getting that sense at all that that's happening out there? I am, and I'll tell you another story also, because yes, I mean, Republicans may have an advantage on voter registration, but I have Republicans that come to my events that tell me, I am so done with what the Republican Party has become. They don't represent me. I wanted to meet you. I'm going to support you in this race. I was at Trader Joe's the other day. I had 30 minutes to get some milk for my mom and the kids at home, and there was a woman that came to me, a Hispanic woman, very serious, and she wanted to talk to me. She recognized me, and she said, I want you to know I'm a Republican. I live in Kendall. I have 10 people in my house. We're all voting for you for Senate.
Do you get to? Are there going to be debates? Are you going to be debating? I mean, I'm sure you want to.
Yes, I'm ready.
And has he accepted?
We'll see if he has the courage to debate me.
All right. If he wants, you guys can come here. I'd love to have you on.
I'm ready, Jim.
All right.
Yeah.
I'm sure we'll talk to you again before Election Day, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
And of course, Rick Scott has every opportunity to come in. We've offered that opportunity. If he wants to come in and sit down, we'd love to have him. All right, when we come back, is building an incinerator on the edge of the Everglades a good idea? The mayor of Miramar will join us to tell us why it's not. Stay with us. Welcome back. In February 2023, Miami-Dade's trash incinerator burned to the ground. As a result, the county is now hauling much of its trash out of the county on trucks and trains, a system that is both expensive and not sustainable. The facility probably does need to be rebuilt. The only question is where. Rebuilding in Doral makes the most sense. It's far less expensive, and it's already been permitted as an incinerator. But the residents in Doral, who, I'll remind you, bought their homes knowing that an incinerator was already there, don't want it to be rebuilt. So Miami-Dade Mayor Danielle Levine-Cava and others have come up with a new plan to build it on an abandoned airport site near the Broward County line known as Airport West, which is located on the edge of the Everglades. It is also close to the town of Miramar, which this week threatened to sue if the county moves forward later this month with this abandoned airport site. Joining me to discuss this is the mayor of Miramar, Wayne Messam. Mr. Mayor, thank you for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so let's start with before we move to the new proposal, yet another proposal, let's stick with the idea of building it at the Airport West site, the old Opelika Airport site as it's known, which is just right there on the edge of the Everglades, about a half a mile from Miramar?
It's less than an eighth of a mile.
Eighth of a mile from Miramar. So why do you oppose it?
Well, we for many reasons. For its human risk factors it presents, the challenges and violations of several environmental acts that are in place to preserve and protect sensitive and endangered species and sensitive sites. And when you think about it, the fact that Miramar wasn't even contacted when this was initially proposed and stated that there were no residents, we were appalled, we were upset, and we raised our voice in opposition.
So you're threatening to likely sue if the county picks this site. This is probably going to play out for years, is it not?
Well, it's a choice that Miami-Dade County has to make. My role as the mayor is to lead our community and to protect our community. And when you think about such a massive industrial site that abuts the water supply for South Florida, so across the street from the Everglades, the risk it poses to our residents, it just does not make sense. The site simply is not permittable on so many levels in terms of permitting from a regulatory agency, environmental requirements that incinerator would have to meet. So it just makes no sense for this to even be an option.
Do you just oppose this site, or would you favor a different site?
Well, the city of Miramar, our position is that we wouldn't wish an incinerator on anyone's neighborhood. Our position is that Airport West is right against our city, and we feel that that is not the site it should be built. We really think that this is a great opportunity for Miami-Dade County to take the lead in having this conversation on how we dispose of trash in South Florida. And Miami-Dade County should look at alternative ways to more sustainably process its waste, opposed to mass incineration.
So you think there may be a different way, so no incinerator, so not even putting it necessarily back in Doral?
There are so many advanced technologies outside of mass burning of garbage that have been proven in Europe and other places of the country, and we urge Miami-Dade County to explore those options. We really think that there is a great opportunity regionally, including Broward County, who also is conducting a master plan study to look at all forms of trash disposal. If you're going to spend $1.5 billion on a new incinerator, it just makes sense, since you're at the ground floor, to really reimagine how we dispose waste.
Tell me about Miramar. Give me the demographics on your community. You have a very large black population in Miramar, do you not?
Yes, we're about 45% black and West Indian, about 32% Hispanic, Latino, and the balance is the rest of our amazing residents. So being a majority black and brown community, there are many civil rights and environmental justice issues that we haven't even really delved into yet.
Well, I know you've mentioned that before, and I just want to ask, do you believe that there is an element of racism in the site selection for the Airport West site? In other words, we'll stick it in their community, not ours?
Well, I'm not saying that there's racism there. We're just saying that being a community of color, historically, industrial sites that have human risk and hazardous materials have oftentimes been placed near those communities. We're just saying that Airport West, for many factors, not just the sensitive environmental and human risk issues, but as well as what it would communicate in terms of just being a good neighbor. The initial report that made the Airport West site the preferred site stated that there were no residents near the site. It was not only a lie, it just shows the absence of just common sense in the Arcadis report that the mayor relied upon to make her recommendation to the Board of Miami-Dade County Commissioners.
You know, last week it came out that that there is a new proposal from a private developer that wants to try to do a land swap on a site that is also near the Everglades, a little further south than the Airport West site, but not too far south, still fairly close to Miramar. Would you be more supportive of that site?
I think more accurately stated, this new fourth site is merely about a half a mile south of the Airport West site. It still abuts the Everglades across the street from US 27, which, by the way, the Everglades starts at Lake Okeechobee and runs straight down to the Florida Bay. It presents the same environmental profile as the Airport West site. So, of course, we oppose it, not just because of those environmental issues and challenges, but it's still just barely over a mile and a half from residents in the city of Miramar.
As you're encouraging folks in Miramar to show up, I think the county commission is scheduled to take this up in about 2 weeks. You're encouraging folks. You've also been trying to rally support within Broward County to make Broward County aware of what's about to take or could potentially be taking place on their border. Do you see this tension between Dade and Broward? Do you think that Broward County has been disrespected by this process from Miami-Dade?
Well, what I will say is that Broward County as well has to solve garbage disposal in of itself. But what I can share in terms of support and solidarity, there is a very powerful coalition of environmental organizations that will be released and announced next week that will stand with Miramar in opposition of not only Airport West site, but also the proposed fourth site. We're in direct communication with the Tropical Audubon, as well as the Center for Biodiversity in South Florida that say that Airport West site and this fourth site just is not suitable. So we have a powerful coalition that will stand with us. We're not just threatening a lawsuit, we're fighting to protect sensitive environments that our South Florida ecosystem needs. There's already been documented bonnet bats that are there. The Everglades snail kite also resides there. There are so many violations.
Well, it's about our water supply, more importantly.
And finally, our water supply, the C9 impoundment area, Airport West site abuts that. And for those listeners who may not be familiar with the C9 impoundment area, there's been over $1 billion invested by the federal government and the state in terms of water conservation and water supply that feeds all of South Florida. That's why this is so upsetting. A mishap, a catastrophe, a malfunction of an incinerator that sits above and next to our water supply is unforgivable. You can't undo a spill. You can't undo this type of contamination. That's why it was just so misguided and alarming to see that this site is even being considered, much less a fourth site that shares a very similar environmental profile.
Are you disappointed in Danielle Levine-Cava, the mayor of Miami-Dade County, for how she's handled this?
I don't have a personal position. I know the mayor. I would say that we are political friends. I just think that the rush to solve an issue with this fire, with this report, there needed to be something communicated to Miami-Dade County residents on an issue that has been kicked down the road for so many times. But what we're saying is that if Airport West is going to be the selected site, if the Board of County Commissioners select this site, and the thought that they are making a decision now to address a very important issue and a ticking time bomb, this site is going to be tied up in litigation for 10 years, much less going through the very long and tedious process for regulatory approval. And we feel we have standing, and just quite simply, the site is not permittable.
We talk about, there's a lot of talk about the mayor running potentially for governor in 2 years, Danielle Levine-Cava. She would need the support of environmentalists. What do you think her chances would be if she moves forward with this sort of a site? She seemed to wait on it until after the election to make this announcement. Well, she may have another election. Does she need to worry about that?
Well, I can't speculate on the political pursuits of Mayor Levine-Cava. What I can say is that as a fellow mayor, our job and our responsibility is to look out for the safety and well-being of our constituents. This cannot be a more important decision on where to put this site. And when you make smart decisions as relates to protecting the environment, regardless of whatever position you're running for, it will be a strong benefit to you.
I got it. Thank you very much for your time. I'm sorry to cut you off. I have a feeling we're going to continue this conversation for some time. All right, we'll be right back after the break. Well, that's all the time we have. We'll be back again next week. Thanks again for watching, and enjoy the rest of your day.